Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my very special guest is again our United States Senator David Vitter. He's running for governor. He's developed a plan that's on his website. It has 14 chapters of the issues that he's learned from talking to you. He's also going to talk to us about the big issues facing this nation and the world, the Iran treaty, and the horrible economy in America right now. So join us on the next Legal Lines with our United States Senator, David Vitter. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're going to talk about the law and you and why it should matter to you what a law is. You know, in America, in our cities, in our states, in our federal governments, they all pass thousands, hundreds of thousands of laws, regulations every single year, and they either directly or indirectly affect you. That's why you need to know what a law is. It's an exercise of power over people, places, and things. So join us on the next Legal Lines, where knowledge is power. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I'm very pleased, frankly, to continue a show with our United States Senator David Vitter. He's running for governor. David, let's dive back in.
Absolutely.
Thanks again.
Great to be with you, Locke.
I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
Let's dive back in. You said the number one issue was jobs.
Yeah.
And you've focused a lot of your plan on maximizing the resources of the state, which is minerals, land, and our waterways.
Yeah.
Which means, I guess, for minerals, energy, and then you got your farmers and your fisheries and such. Tell me about your plans in that regard.
Well, first of all, let me just remind folks they can see all of our sort of concrete, detailed ideas in our full plan. It's called Together Louisiana Strong, our blueprint for building a brighter future. It's all at davidvitter.com.
And it's very detailed. I've read every single page.
Detailed, and we did that for a reason, Locke. I think we're way beyond the need for vague political rhetoric, for throwaway campaign promises, for political jokes. We need a real plan for moving forward. Build a team, execute that plan with strong leadership. That's
Agreed.
What our campaign is about. And all of those issues, energy, agriculture, fishermen, key components of our economy, are in the plan.
Well, and frankly, it reminds me of back 30 years ago when Ronald Reagan was running for president. Newt Gingrich was the leader of the House, and they had their 10 plan, and it was a way to say, this is what I'm going to do if you let me, and if I don't do it, kick me out.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the idea behind it. I mean, this is printed, it's available, it's online, it's not going anywhere. First of all, I'm going to have it on my desk every day, and I'm going to have it on my nightstand every night. But I invite people to have a copy, to hold me accountable, to hold our team accountable. That's the way democracy is supposed to work.
Well, David, you know, you started out running saying, I'm going to listen, learn, and then lead. But you're not going to quit listening. When I was reading the plan, you're staying in contact in ways that I've really never seen a governor stay in contact with folks. Tell folks about it.
That was the first chapter of the plan we released called Keeping in Touch. You need to do that. You need to constantly be informed. You can't live in a bubble.
Right.
Quite frankly, I think one of our present governor's biggest mistakes is to allow himself to be sort of cordoned off and protected by gatekeeper after gatekeeper after gatekeeper. That's never going to happen with me.
And you don't get the truth.
Yeah, and I'm going to reach out and have those town hall meetings in every parish, just like I have now. Have a monthly open house at the governor's mansion where any citizen can come and talk in a relaxed atmosphere.
You know, you've indicated, I think you have well over 300 town hall meetings, and you're in essence, as governor, if you're elected, going to go to where the people are.
Absolutely, yeah. You don't have to travel to Baton Rouge, although you're welcome to, and we'll have regular open houses at the governor's mansion, but I'll have town halls in every parish in the state.
So any way they want to get in touch with you, you're going to them, they can come to you, literally come to you at the mansion, and you've got a social media presence.
Digitally too.
That's right.
They can email, they can Facebook, they can do all that.
Well, I mean, that's a wonderful concept, and it makes you accountable. Is the bottom line. You're going to get a lot of feedback, so it's a good thing, I think. Let's talk about the people. So the jobs we were talking about, you said you're going to focus on energy. Explain how.
Well, look, that's traditionally a big part of our economy.
Huge.
We need to continue to diversify. We'd like for it to be bigger and at the same time a smaller percentage, right? So I'm trying to do both of those things, grow it, but grow other things too.
Not have all your eggs in that one basket.
But for the foreseeable future, energy is going to be really important, and we can improve some things to continue to grow that energy economy. I have a little bit of perspective there. because I grew up in South Louisiana. My dad worked his whole career with Chevron. He was chief of production. He was a petroleum engineer there for his whole career. So I got a little bit of insight traveling with him on helicopters out to rigs in the Gulf. I'm sure Chevron lawyers would never allow that anymore, but they did, thank goodness, when I was, 11 years old in 1972.
David, we've talked about it in the past, but in your role as a United States Senator, we've talked about the importance of energy,
Sure.
not just to Louisiana, but
Oh, yeah.
the entire United
Yeah.
States of America from a national security concern.
And we have the opportunity for an energy renaissance. Now, right now, the big issue is low price. Obviously, the price of oil is quite low, and that's stalling production. But that'll recover over time. And for when it does, we need to be ready. And we need to have a wide open availability to develop that in a sustainable way right here in Louisiana.
Now, what about the farmers and the fisheries?
Yeah.
How do you protect those guys?
Yeah, that's another part of our traditional economy, timber, farmers, fishermen, forestry, and we can't forget that. I think, Locke, in economic development, we often get caught up with the new stuff, the sexy stuff, movies and high tech.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great, that's real, that's good, those are good paying jobs. I'm not diminishing any of that. But we need to continue to grow our base. And in many cases, we're going to do better growing our existing base than going after long shots. So we need to do both, and that includes agriculture, fisheries, certainly forestry, which is part of that.
Right.
Fisheries, we have the most productive in the United States after Alaska, enormously productive.
Really? I didn't know that.
Enormously, yeah, enormously important. Alaska is bigger because when you look at their coastline, I mean, they have a coastline that dwarfs ours just in terms of miles.
Right.
But after Alaska, we're the most important, and we're extremely productive. And ag all through Louisiana is very, very important. I've been very involved in all of those issues in the Senate. I think that gives me some background and perspective on that, and I'll bring that same focus and passion to state government.
Well, and folks need to know that you are currently in the highest position a Republican can hold on several committees in the Senate on areas of the economy that are so important to Louisiana, and you have protected us.
Yeah, and I've worked very closely with the ag sector, working on farm bills for the benefit of farmers here, improving that situation, also improving it for the taxpayer. Worked very closely on forestry issues, so I'll bring that experience to bear as well.
Well, and on the energy side, as I recall, that you've been pushing for more revenue sharing from the federal government, giving us money from sucking oil off our coastline, and making sure we're getting our fair share of that stuff.
That's finally coming. We talked about revenue sharing for 50 years. Finally, a few years ago, we passed it into law at the federal level. I worked on that with the rest of our federal delegation, and that will really ramp up in terms of dollars within the next 5 years.
Excellent.
And that, not to necessarily switch subjects, but that's a key piece of the puzzle for coastal restoration as well, because we need that money in a carefully spent, dedicated way for coastal restoration.
And I read some amount. How many square miles have we lost since the 30s? I mean, it's like losing a whole parish.
It's like losing a state. We've lost more than the entire state of Delaware.
Good gosh.
Right now, still, we lose a football field of land in coastal Louisiana, if you can just imagine a football field, every 38 minutes.
Holy
And
moly.
that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
And that's one of the things that helps protect us from the ravages of flooding and hurricanes.
That's our first line of defense.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. My special guest, United States Senator David Vitter, running for governor. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're going to talk about the law and you and why it should matter to you what a law is. In America, in our cities, in our states, in our federal governments, they all pass thousands, hundreds of thousands of laws, regulations every single year, and they either directly or indirectly affect you. That's why you need to know what a law is. It's an exercise of power over people, places, and things. So join us on the next Legal Lines, where knowledge is power. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have back on the show our United States Senator David Vitter. He's running for governor. He's talking to us about his plans for the state if he is in fact elected governor. David, let's talk about the coastal restoration a little bit more.
Yeah.
So explain to folks kind of what you plan on doing.
Well, the good news is, we've spent years developing a coastal master plan, and it's a pretty sound one. It'll need to be revised and adapted over time, but it's a sound plan. The second bit of good news is that finally we have some big pieces of the puzzle coming together to execute, to pay for that, namely BP settlement money.
Right.
Big,
unless it
big
gets
dollars.
raided, right?
Well, yeah, we can't allow that. Absolutely can't allow that. Restore Act, which is also related to the BP disaster, and revenue sharing. Those are the three big pieces of the puzzle. You're exactly right. Step one is we need to make absolutely sure that is not rated. I want more flexibility in the budget in most areas, not that. That needs to be sacrosanct because we need every penny of those resources to execute the master plan. Over time, we'll eventually need more, but we absolutely need to protect
And that is not dedicated funds?
It is in significant ways. I think there are ways at the fringes that the legislature or others can nip at that and try to move money. I am completely 1,000% against that, and I'll certainly prevent that.
And the reason you're so set against that is because of why? You traveled watching people suffer from the hurricane.
Yeah, and look, like I said, a football field of land lost every 38 minutes. This is a crisis, and we don't have multiple opportunities to fix it before it's too late. We got to get this right. We got to get it right now. And so we need to execute that plan. We need to accelerate putting shovels in the ground, actually building projects. I'm tired of studying things to death, whether the Corps studies it to death or we study it to death here on the ground. We need to start building some key projects. And again, that's part of my plan in terms of the coastal restoration chapter. Let's take 3 to 5 of those significant projects, put those on steroids, accelerate those, put shovels in the ground, give people hope, and get on with it, and don't study things to death.
And you've actually held the Army Corps of Engineers, which is a federal agency's feet to the fire.
Oh yeah, that's been a lot of my work in the Senate. I happen to serve on the committee that oversees the Corps, and certainly between Hurricane Katrina and Rita and Gustav and Ike and coastal restoration, I've spent a lot of time working with and sometimes against the Corps to hold their feet to the fire.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Part of we talked about in the beginning is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Yeah. Let's talk about folks in healthcare and the hospitalization issues and Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff. Explain to folks what your plans are.
Yeah. Well, two big issues that we face on the healthcare side in Louisiana. One is the relatively new public-private partnerships. The old charity system has now been transformed, and we have these public-private partnerships. I think in general, that's the right model. We needed to move to that. Those private partners have strengths, have capabilities, including financial deep pockets that help us. But we're going to have to fine-tune that along the way. In particular, I think we have a relatively weak public-private partnership in North Louisiana, and I think we're going to have to redo that and stabilize that to preserve the medical school there and to lift up our resources there. So that's one big area. The second big state healthcare issue is Medicaid expansion.
Right.
And I've said that I wouldn't rule that out. I'm open to that if we do it on our terms, on Louisiana's terms, and if we do it with eyes wide open in a responsible way. I'm particularly focused on 3 parameters. Number 1, we need a real and a conservative plan about where the state match comes from. This is not all free federal money.
That's right. People don't understand that.
It takes a state match. And if we lunge into that and have no realistic plan for the state match, what happens? In a year or two, we're back to same old, digging the hole deeper, having to cut higher ed or something else. So we need a plan about the state match. Number 2, I don't want to increase the disincentive for able-bodied folks to work. In fact, I want to increase work requirements for able-bodied folks. And number 3, I want to reform and improve Medicaid, not just expand what's a mediocre or broken system in many ways. So I'd like to look at options like coverage options, give people coverage, not just traditional Medicaid.
What currently, as I understand a lot of those issues, the federal government is mandating, and is that why Jindal said, I don't agree with this stuff?
Well, the federal government makes you come to them and say, pretty please, for any change
All kinds of
from
strings.
the norm. Any change from the norm. But if we're going to do that, I would push a lot of changes from the norm and demand that from the feds. Now, if we explore that, I think we're actually in a very good posture because the feds are desperate to have more states do this. And so I think we should use every bit of that negotiating leverage to get real and meaningful and positive reforms out of the situation. In other words, exactly the opposite of how John Kerry approached the Iranians.
Right, yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about crime, because one of the functions of government, even at the state level, is providing a safe world for folks.
Absolutely.
How do you focus on that?
Well, first of all, if you talk about violent crime, you need to talk about Baton Rouge to some extent, but even more in New Orleans.
Right.
I'm really concerned, I don't mean to be alarmist, but I'm really concerned that we could be one bad murder on Bourbon Street away from an implosion of our tourist economy, which is a big part of our statewide economy. And the city and New Orleans Police Department aren't getting the job done. That's why I said I would be open to creating a whole new state police troop stationed in New Orleans, focused on high-profile areas like the French Quarter, if it's paid for with local revenue and tourism dollars. Now, I'm not going to rob Baton Rouge and Northwest Louisiana and Southeast or Southwest Louisiana to move state troopers to New Orleans.
Got it.
But I will develop a whole new troop if it's paid for with those funds. And in fact, folks there are exploring that, led by the tourism industry, because they understand the threat. That troop could also be really productive and important in terms of training New Orleans Police Department.
Well, and I've actually had Colonel Mike Edmondson of the Louisiana State Police on several times. I think they've even gone down there at times during Mardi Gras and such.
They have. They do that regularly, but it's ad hoc. It's not permanent.
Exactly.
And I wish that were all that was needed.
Because it worked when he was there.
It works, but unfortunately, New Orleans isn't there yet. And so I think we need to expand that model as long as it's paid for out of New Orleans.
Well, and another reason, David, is the fact that we are a high target for terrorism because of our massive port there. And it would be another presence of state police.
And we have a lot of national, international events, occasional Super Bowls, et cetera.
Excellent. All right. What other kind of crime-focused initiatives are you contemplating? I know there's a coordination of the various resources.
The other end of the spectrum is criminal justice reform. Look, I think of things a little bit one end or the other. Violent criminals, we need to put them away.
All right, we'll continue that.
Others, we don't.
We'll continue that on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. My special guest, United States Senator David Vitter, running for governor. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're going to talk about you and the law. You know, a law is nothing but an exercise of power over you, people, places, or things. But where does that power come from? Where does the government get that power? And how is that power exercised? And do you play a role at all? That's what you need to know. So join us on the next Legal Lines, where knowledge is power. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Very pleased to have back on the show our United States Senator David Vitter. He's running for governor. David, thanks again. Let's dive back in. We were talking about two components to providing a safe place for folks.
Right.
And you're focusing on the criminal justice system. Tell folks.
Well, look, violent criminals are a real threat, and we need to be very strong there. But the other end of the spectrum, I think, in some cases, we warehouse way too many people. And we often warehouse them with more hardened, violent criminals, where the only thing they're learning is how to prey on us more effectively.
Become what they're around.
Correct. And so we need to change that, and we need to look at different models than just warehousing people, not preparing them for productive lives on the outside.
And so you're focusing more on separating the
absolutely.
category of criminals and then the ones who you think have a shot at returning back to society to be productive.
I think, look, we need to be careful. We don't want to take chances, again, with violent criminals, anything else. But I think there are ways to save the taxpayer money and give them effective training for re-entry at the same time. There are a lot of good models out there around the country. We're trying to mine the best of those and see what can work here. And there are some good models right here in Louisiana.
And I've had our drug court judge on, and they've talked about it. There's so many of them that have drug issues and such, and if you can get them off the drugs and get them trained.
Another component of that is mental health.
Right.
We have serious mental health issues around the country, including in Louisiana. And too often those needs are falling through the cracks.
That's right.
And they end up two places. The emergency room, which is a very expensive place for us to deal with it. And I say us because we're usually paying for it.
Right.
And criminal justice. And you know, when in most parishes in Louisiana, the single biggest mental health provider, quote unquote, is the sheriff.
We got a problem.
Something's wrong.
And so we got to address that.
Yep.
Let's talk about, because one of your chapters deals with protecting life. Yeah. Tell folks about your position.
Well, I'm 1,000% pro-life. That's a sacred value for a lot of folks in Louisiana. I share that. Now, obviously, with the current Supreme Court jurisprudence, we can't just wipe that away, but I think we can do things to do everything possible to educate folks and lift up and protect and value life on some abortion issues. Also on other issues, I think we can be far more effective on foster care and adoption. And I've been looking at models and ideas around the United States about how we involve more businesses and churches and community-based groups to really find homes for foster children and prospective adopted children.
And I saw that part of your contemplation was to educate mamas with ultrasound so they can actually see and understand that this is a baby inside.
And make an informed decision, absolutely.
What's your position on Planned Parenthood after all these just horrific videos?
Yeah, well, Locke, I had legislation to defund Planned Parenthood of taxpayer funds way before these horrible things came to light. And unfortunately, what we're learning about their attitude and their practices, I think clearly confirms the need to do that.
David, it seems like the world is a mess and there's such obvious evil in it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about ISIS. Put on your U.S. Senator hat and tell me what do we do about the Middle East? There's so much turmoil, and it looks like given the Iran treaty.
Yeah, well, step one is what we don't do, which is launch into this agreement with Iran. I think that's a horrible mistake. I'm going back to Washington soon to fight that, to vote for a motion of disapproval to try to block that. Seems like President Obama has the votes on his side.
I cannot believe this.
But we're going to have a debate on the floor of the Senate. We're going to call some things to light. We're going to ask the American people to weigh in. Hopefully that can change. And then in the fight against ISIS, we need a more aggressive strategy. We're losing that battle. And that is a danger directly pointed at us. Now, look, just like every other American, I don't want to put American boots on the ground and sacrifice more money, more blood. We need the Middle Eastern countries who are also threatened to step up. But we need to do that more effectively than we are.
David, ISIS is literally just murdering a lot of Christians and a lot of Muslims too, just because they don't believe like they do. They're making the little baby girls 9 years old and up into sex slaves. And what I'm hearing, if this is true, it's so disturbing. Our government will not allow Christians to be brought in for asylum.
It is horrible. It is political correctness gone mad, turned into, in some ways, bias against Christians.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
Well, let's talk about, because now I'm going, okay, there's this treaty. We're giving Iran $150 billion. They support terrorists all over the world.
And we know with certainty, Locke, that they'll use a good chunk of that money to continue to support terrorism against us.
That's
we know
right.
That. That's undisputed. We know that. It's crazy.
And as a result, and not just us, but Saudi Arabia and Israel. And so Kerry, our Secretary of State, says, I understand today or yesterday, he's given billions of dollars to Israel and Saudi Arabia and others over there. So we're literally funding both sides of the war.
Right, right. So why don't we save all of those billions by backing up and not doing the deal? We had an effective sanctions regime that was making an impact, that was putting the squeeze tighter and tighter against this horrible Iranian regime, and giving the people of Iran some hope by putting pressure on a horrible government. We're taking all of that pressure off through this deal.
Let's shift gears real fast. The economy. Still, almost 50% of folks are getting some form of check. Almost a third of our population is unemployed, not seeking jobs. What do we do?
Well, like what I'm most worried about long term is that we're sort of establishing a new normal. A new normal in terms of public assistance and not asking people to work or requiring people to work. A new normal in terms of expectations about growth. I mean, we're talking about 2% growth, like that's adequate.
Great.
It's not under any circumstances. So we need to get out of this new normal and get back to the sort of dynamic growth and dynamic economy that America used to be known for.
And it seems like something that Louisiana has that can help the entire United States and the world. Energy deals with both of those issues.
Reliable American energy that has fueled, again, I guess pun intended, that has fueled great American growth in the past. The post-World War II growth, boom, 1950s. Cheap, reliable energy was a key part of that. And we need to preserve that key component, not wipe it away with federal overregulation.
What is your read on the slowdown in China? Europe is getting, it looks like they're doing more of the QE. They're being infiltrated by immigrants who are just fleeing for their lives.
Yeah, I'm concerned that, again, worldwide, this is a new normal of lower growth, lower expectations. I'm not prepared to accept that at all. And
your thoughts on the border and immigration?
Well, we need much stronger enforcement at the border and in the workplace. And this impacts Louisiana. A lot of folks don't realize we're now one of the top 10 states in where some of these new waves of illegal immigrants are coming. And it's making a big impact here. David, thank you so much. Thank you, Locke,
it's
very
wonderful
much.
having you back on the show.
With you.
This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines, our United States Senator David Vitter running for governor. Thank you for being with us.